Hello everyone. Today's lecture is on the Rohingya crisis. So, who are the Rohingyas? The Rohingyas are an ethnic group of people. The majority of the Rohingyas are Muslims. They lived in Myanmar, particularly in the Rakhine area, for centuries. Since the 12th century, they have been living in Myanmar. They are the indigenous people of Myanmar. Myanmar is a Buddhist majority country, and the Rohingyas, the Muslim minorities, have been facing ethnic cleansing by the Buddhist majority Myanmar government for a long time. So this image shows the destitute condition of the Rohingya people in Myanmar. Here in this image, we can see people, the Rohingyas, fleeing from Myanmar. They were fleeing from the persecution that the Myanmar government inflicted on the Rohingya people. So the caption says, Myanmar is facing charges of genocide at the International Court of Justice over a 2017 military crackdown on the Rohingya that forced 730,000 people to flee into Bangladesh. So this image shows the destitute condition of the Rohingyas who fled from Myanmar, and of course the refugees, when they flee from their country of origin to another country, they go through a lot of trauma, hardship, and mental agony, as this picture is also reflecting. So the Rohingyas, as I said, they have been facing persecution from the Buddhist majority government in Myanmar. So apart from politics, the military remains completely in control of the civil administration of the Rakhine area, which was inhabited by the Rohingyas for many centuries. The period between 2008 and 2012, it was a period of persecution of the Rohingyas, and it was a period of ethnic cleansing. The period saw destruction of mosques, and in that place, the Buddhist pagodas were built instead. The Rakhine Nationalist Development Party has been determined to force the Rohingyas out of Myanmar. So, during the ethnic cleansing in 2012, the Myanmar government drove the Rohingyas out of their homes or to the internal refugee camps. Systematic attempts to force the Rohingyas to leave the state took place. On 3rd June 2012, Buddhists stopped a bus and killed 10 Rohingya Muslims who were traveling abroad, in other words, who were trying to flee from the persecution of the Myanmar government. Then violence followed in the villages, and the Rohingyas were the most affected people in the violence. The local police, dominated by the Rakhine Buddhists, they burnt Muslim villages. Army dumped Rohingya bodies near a refugee camp. After the June riots, the Myanmar president called the Rohingyas and asked for their deportation of the entire community. In other words, the Myanmar president asked for the forced deportation of the Rohingyas from Myanmar. Unfortunately, the United States and the European Union praised the police involvement in riots and praised their heavy-handedness against the Rohingya people. After June 2012, the Myanmar president described the Rohingyas as illegal and non-citizens and asked their transfer to other countries. The June 2012 attack was followed by October 2012 attacks against the Rohingyas in Myanmar. Buddhist monks distributed pamphlets alleging that the Rohingyas were stealing lands and that the ethnic Rakhine people should cease all ties with the Rohingyas, and that's the division they created between the ethnic Rakhine people who were Buddhists and with the indigenous Rohingyas who were mostly Muslims. One Buddhist monk said that Muslim countries should take care of these Rohingyas. Monks and political parties such as the RNDP, the Buddhist party, they started fear-mongering against the Rohingyas and linked them with the Al-Qaeda terrorist group. They spread rumors and arms. They spread rumors that arms and ammunitions were stored in mosques. Social media stirred up online violence against the Rohingyas. There were widespread belief that 3 Buddhists had been killed and 2 Myanmar soldiers were injured by the gunfire, and that was the triggering point of violence against the Rohingyas in October 2012. And hence, on 23rd October, there was a coordinated attacks followed in some villages. Muslims who were legal Muslims and had citizenship, they were forced to flee from their territory. And the army intervened, many people died, and there was extreme violence, and the Rohingyas, some of them managed to flee to their neighboring countries, particularly Bangladesh. In mid-November 2012, the United Nations chief, Ban Ki-moon, acknowledged the problem, that the communal problem was there, and he pledged the Myanmar government to grant citizenship to the Rohingyas. And the United Nations continued to raise their concern. However, violence against the Rohingyas continued. 100,000 Rohingyas ended up in the internal refugee camps in Myanmar. The UNHCR reported 13,000 arrived in Malaysia and 6,000 Rohingyas arrived in Thailand. And the massacres in Myanmar against the Rohingyas continued in 2013 and 2014. The social media in Myanmar they posted anti-Rohingya Muslim news and that they were terrorists and they were made the outsider, or they were singled out as the other in the Myanmar community. So the Rohingyas were portrayed as the other in the Myanmar society. So this image shows a mass exodus of the Rohingyas, particularly from the Rakhine area to Bangladesh. And this image shows the ordeal of the refugees who fled from the oppression and persecution of the Myanmar regime. So there has been an in-depth reporting in the Time magazine about the Myanmar's shame, the Myanmar's genocidal policy. In other words, Myanmar's genocide against the Rohingyas who were predominantly Muslims. The Rohingyas faced ethnic cleansing in Myanmar and they were forced to flee Myanmar and they fled in the neighboring countries, and majority of them arrived in Bangladesh. So in 2017, Myanmar's counterinsurgency over the Rohingyas led to the exodus of nearly 600,000 Muslims. So the Myanmar government, they took their ID cards, they denied their citizenship rights. Instead, they led people to flee through their ethnic cleansing. Aung San Suu Kyi spent 15 years under house arrest and won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1991 as a champion of human rights. Her party, National League for Democracy, and she herself remained silent over the Rohingya plight. So, on the basis of the reporting on Time magazine that was in my previous slide, the report that the Time magazine published on 2nd October 2017 on the destitute condition of the Rohingyas and how they have faced ethnic cleansing in Myanmar. So, on the basis of that reporting, I sent a letter to the editor of the Time magazine, and it was published a couple of weeks later. And this is what I said in my letter on the Rohingya crisis. I wrote, "Your article, Myanmar's Shame, October the 2nd, reminded me of the genocide I witnessed in my country, then East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, in 1971. Now that the Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar are subject to similar genocide or ethnic cleansing, the silence of many world leaders is deafening. And like many other world leaders, Aung San Suu Kyi has preferred politics and power over compassion." Bangladesh has been very generous in accommodating the Rohingya refugees for a long time. And in this image, we can see the Prime Minister of Bangladesh Sheikh Hasina, she urges the world in an event in New York that make Myanmar take back the Rohingyas. So this image also shows the urge from the Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who has urged the world bodies to make Myanmar take back the Rohingyas, who have been the original indigenous people of Myanmar. This is another report, and which is suggesting the United Nations Human Rights Council needs to adopt a reconciliation policy and needs to look into the Rohingya crisis. This is the image of the Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and her daughter Saima Wajid Putul. They posed with the US President Donald Trump and his wife Melania Trump at a reception hosted by the US President in New York. But the mission that Sheikh Hasina, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, had was appeal to the world bodies to look into the Rohingya crisis, which Bangladesh government is facing since the arrival of the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. Finally, the latest report on the Rohingyas published in the Business Standard on 25th August 2020. It reported 4 years on, there is no progress in Rohingya repatriations. Rohingyas in Bangladesh, the total population is now 1.1 million. That is, 9 out of every 10 Rohingyas in the Asia Pacific region live in Bangladesh. Rohingyas have been given shelter on over 6,800 acres of forest land. Subsequently, this shelter has led to the destruction of ecology and environment of the area. It also led to a significant drop in agricultural production. So by giving space to the refugees, Bangladesh is suffering economically, and Bangladesh is a developing country. Health and sanitation have become serious concern in the Rohingya refugee camps. Waterborne diseases have become a major threat to the area. The Bangladesh government is spending huge amount of money to relocate the Rohingyas in the neighboring Chor areas. However, criminal acts such as human trafficking, drug trade, murder, abduction for ransom, sex trade, rape, theft, and robbery is taking place in the area. The COVID-19 pandemic has been an additional crisis in the Rohingya refugee camps. The Bangladesh government has been trying for peaceful solution of the Rohingya crisis through bilateral dialogues. And it is time that the Myanmar government take accountability of the Rohingyas who have been their indigenous population and take them back to their territory. The Rohingyas as refugees in the neighboring countries, say for example in Thailand and in other Asia Pacific region, they are being exploited by the host country. They are employed as cheap labor. So this is a huge refugee crisis the entire Asia Pacific region is facing, and the Rohingya needs to be repatriated to their homeland, which is Myanmar. Thank you.